But the bank was the biggest enemy. Oh, they did a lot of dirty tricks, Daniel. They slimed me on social media. They got personal.
And how do you feel in reflection? Obviously, it was the worst mistake you've made. Do you feel bitter? Do you feel glad it's done? Was it a learning experience?
I went and bought like loads of pills, and then I swallowed about 250 pills or something like that. 15 minutes later, my mum comes in with the letter, and she says, "We can beat these bastards." Now that I didn't expect. And that moment, I said, right. I went all out and fought the bank. And I had to go on social media and call them out because they did a survey but didn't pick up the fire cladding. They sold it without telling the next buyer that the fire cladding was bad. And I got it on tape. So I had to go and get the evidence. And when I did, they basically pulled out the claim on my assets. And I won.
What is that experience like? The highest of highs, the lowest of lows. What's it like?
Lonely. I have to say that's the first thing that comes to mind. And it depends how you kind of frame that, because lonely can be really good in terms of you're singular in what you want to do. And a lot of the time people aren't going to understand it. And they're not going to rescue you. The journey is, again, it's to do with experience and wisdom. The journey is the most important part of your life. And I've learned recently in the last 5 years that your journey and your story is your greatest asset.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a huge honour to welcome a very special guest to today's Blueprint podcast. We're going to go 6 rounds with myself and a very special guest, Sir Marco Robinson. He has quite the story to tell and has achieved a huge amount from very humble beginnings, from somebody who was bullied at school and actually homeless at a time, has now gone on to achieve huge global success, whether that was becoming 2 times Entrepreneur of the Year, whether it was producing a film that actually made it to number 2 in the USA Netflix charts. Some of you will recognise him from the Channel 4 documentary where he actually gave away properties for free. He is now a producer. He is a huge influencer across social media around the world. He is also a philanthropist who does a lot of charity work. I'm very excited to have him as my guest for today's 6-round podcast episode, Sir Marco Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome.
Whoa. Together, and I started noticing red flags, not on the business, not bringing his mum in to do the accountancy, not good, even though I said don't do that. And it went on for a couple of years, and then he bought a property without telling me, unilaterally made the decision, because we were 50-50. I could have stopped it, but I went with it.
Yeah.
And this was a property with 51 flats. It was in Manchester. It looks really good on paper. But when it completed, the fire cladding started falling off the walls. So if you imagine
So it's like pre-Grenfell?
This is pre-Grenfell.
Yeah.
The fire brigade came and condemned the building.
Okay.
And this was a 30 grand bridging loan, no tenants. And I found out this family member was embezzling money out of the company. And I had to sue him and 8 people.
Yeah, that's no fun.
No. I mean, the 8 people were the builders inspectors, the local council, the developer, the insurer. Oh, it just went on and on and on. This went on for years.
Did that have an impact on the friendship, the family relationship?
It had a huge impact, and I've completely disconnected, cut off that family member and the rest of the family that supported that person. Best thing I ever did, by the way.
Okay.
Right? But the pain and the torture, because I had other investors with me that invested in it, and of course I had to pay them back, right? So the legalities cost me about 5 million, but I probably lost 250 million in that one transaction.
Wow.
And then in 2019, it was so bad, the bank sent a letter to my mum's house, who I bought for her, threatening to repossess it.
No way.
Yeah. So when that landed, and it was like just about the pandemic coming. I literally the legal battle was just horrendous.
And is it all done dusted now?
All done and dusted now.
And how do you feel in reflection? Obviously, it was the worst mistake you've made. Do you feel bitter? Do you feel glad it's done? Was it a learning experience?
There's no human in the world that would say they don't, that they kind of don't regret anything at all.
Yeah.
That's just not true. I mean, yes, I'm still a tiny bit bitter, but I'm very in gratitude. Has to be there, otherwise don't do it.
I just see Mike Ashley's just appointed a new board member to their board for the Fraser Group. I don't know how up to speed you are with that, but he's now got the two partners of his two daughters on the board. And I read it. I mean, he's a streetwise guy as well. You know anything about him. And I did look at it and just thought, what's at play there? Because now he's being challenged by shareholders who are saying there's an because
conflict of interest, isn't it?
Yeah, and what's the word where you employ people because of who they are, not what they can do? Is it nepotism?
Nepotism. Yeah.
And I thought, what is actually at play there? Because for him, that's a dangerous strategy.
Yeah.
For his daughters, it's a dangerous strategy. And the shareholders are now looking at it thinking the chance of those two seats being filled most effectively by his two, one in-law and one to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you just think, what is... My sentiment would be, it's good while it lasts. I'd probably the best 5 to 7 years of my life with my friends, building my business, had all of my friends, all of my family working with us. And it was amazing while it lasts. The problem is, as time does its thing or money does its thing, you get to a fork in the road where some want to grow, some don't.
Yeah.
Some can grow, some can't.
And
the culture changes.
Then you get the money factor with the greed. Oh, there's all this money coming. I deserve more than you and all this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That plays a big factor.
Yeah, and I think it is, definitely is. So yeah, people show their true colours. In answer to your question about my biggest mistake, I don't actually know. I think as an optimist, I always think there's a great Conor McGregor that quote. I don't know if it's actually his, but it says, "I never lose. I either win or I learn."
Yeah.
And I always feel like that when people say, "What do you regret?" Even the holes that I've ended up in, I think I sort of I don't necessarily regret it. But I've definitely made mistakes. The biggest one that springs to mind is probably when I make emotional decisions with logic. So when I've had relationships or I've had family matters, things to address, my biggest mistake is probably approaching personal decisions with like a professional mindset. And I think that's prevented me progressing as an individual quite a lot. Yeah. And that's probably what I'm working on moving forward.
Okay.
I would say.
Affected your personal growth and your relationships, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think where I've just been, in order to be effective at business, which has always been my primary focus, I've always been very strategic. Yeah, and I think that's really important when you're negotiating deals. And I'm not saying I'm like an iron fist or a robot or anything like that, but you need to understand human nature and psychology and the way to have an intelligent conversation and things like that. And that serves you really well. I actually got to a point in the pandemic, actually, where I was having a bit of a reflective period. And I said to one of my friends, I said, do you think you get to a point where you can know too much? And what I meant was I've studied all sorts of like NLP, psychology, even just through the hard knocks of life, learning how to get what you need and want and even the best out of people. And I thought that personally was getting in the way because I couldn't have relaxed, honest, personal conversations because in my head, I was just running a script. Yeah. Like I'm second thinking what they're going to say. What are they saying, but what do they actually mean? They're saying something, but I can see their body language doesn't align to it. And I just felt it started to get in my way. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where either professional mindset's got in the way of personal or personal times. The other way around.
Because your intuition's telling you something completely different. in a conversation, isn't it, with someone? And, you know, I think your radar gets more attuned as you get older and it's more experienced with life.
That's wisdom, isn't it? Yeah. Can't teach wisdom.
Yeah. But in terms of emotional kind of maturity and intelligence, that's the most difficult thing, because you've got to be able to deal with all kinds of people.
What sort of person would you say you are emotionally? You've been through all sorts of chapters of life. What would you say? How would you sort of describe yourself as a thinker, a feeler, emotionally, mentally? What sort of like person are you?
Yeah, I mean, everyone thinks I'm an extrovert, and I'm not at all. I'm an introvert.
Interesting. Did you always know that?
Yeah.
I'm the same.
Because you go all there, you're speaking on stage, and, oh my God, you're so confident, you're so not afraid of anything.
I was looking through your Instagram last week. I was like, this guy's going to be loud in the studio.
Right.
It's like power suits, Channel 4 documentaries, but you're not actually an extrovert. Yeah. I would have all day long said you're an extrovert. Yeah.
So I think that's been the hardest thing for me to deal with. I remember my first public speaking occasion. It was my best friend's wedding. I was 18.
Yeah.
And literally, I was sweating for like weeks before I was going to go up and stand the first time in front of people. And on the day, I sweated through 3 suits, and I just stuttered the whole way through it. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I conquered it by just kept doing it. Just kept doing it because I had to do. I was selling timeshare in the late 80s and I had to do it in front of loads of people. So that's been the biggest challenge for me, I think, internally, to do that.
Same. I realised in 2011 I had 2 fears that were going to stop me from enjoying what I wanted to do. And one was fear of flying.
Yeah.
And the second was fear of public speaking. So I started doing my private pilot's license. I thought that's one way to get over it.
Yeah.
And then I booked into the Property Investors Network to speak at 20 events a year. And I did it for 5 years. And I can honestly say for the first 3 years, I would sit at the back before I spoke and say to myself, if someone gave me the opportunity now to walk out the door and get back in my car, would I? And I was like, yes. Yeah. And I still feel like that now every now and again.
Yeah.
How do you know what introverted traits do you notice in yourself? Like if someone's listening to this thinking, am I an introvert? Am I an extrovert? How do you see it come out in yourself?
I think I think other people validated that for me, because whenever you do a big speech, I would go home and they say, let's go and celebrate everyone else around you. No, I want to go home and watch a film and curl up on the sofa and just disappear.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the signs that I had, really, because I didn't want to go and celebrate and get, slaughtered and all that kind of stuff. That was never my thing. Going out drinking with my mates was never my thing, And I recently found out I'm ADHD. I got diagnosed a year ago.
How many entrepreneurs do you think have actually got ADHD, OCD?
In different levels, many probably.
Yeah, it seems every maybe not always ADHD, but the amount of people, high performers I've met in the last couple of years who are dyslexic, ADHD,
autistic,
OCD, autistic. I mean, Elon Musk, he's Asperger's, isn't it? And you do think, why would we push ourselves to these levels? Maybe it is.
I think that's where we feel comfortable, though, isn't it? We feel, well, I'm speaking personally, but I feel comfortable in those different areas of life, the different spectrums of risk. But you kind of, as you said, wisdom educates you on risk. Now, when I was a kid, I was at the back of the classroom when I was 6 years old, looking out the window. Never engaged with academics. I just couldn't do it. I pushed myself to do it, and I labelled myself lazy and stupid. And my teachers confirmed that basically wasn't concentrating, wasn't going to go anywhere, didn't get in university, but, dropped out at 15. And you kind of go through life conditioned with that mindset, thinking, well, maybe I am stupid.
Did you ever think that, though?
I did it partly, yeah.
Did you?
I thought I wasn't good enough to get to university.
Shows how high impact what you get told as a child is, isn't it? Whether it's by parents, kids. I would say I've never thought I was stupid. I actually always thought I could get away with it. I remember reading a quote once in my adult life that said, the older I get, the more I realise nobody's got a clue and they're all effing blagging it. And I was like, do you know what?
True,
I've actually felt like that.
Yeah.
But I also think I've also realised in the last 6 to 12 months, I feel I've got very high self-esteem. So I feel confident and I feel like that self-esteem, but I've
Yeah.
also had quite a low self-worth.
Yes.
Which is a very new thing for me, having a low self-worth. And I realised I do undervalue my time. I do undervalue my ability. And I think that's been a trap for me. But also it's been a blessing in disguise, I suppose. You don't go out and try and high perform if everyone thinks you're amazing. If you've got a low self-worth, you probably, want to prove it to yourself.
I think it's a massive internal thing for sure. There's actually a new book in it by Jamie Kern-Lima. Have you heard of her?
No, is it good?
It's called Worthy.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and she's amazing. She was the first lady to do a cosmetic brand for curvy women.
Oh, right.
And she went to every brand and asked them to investors, and they said no, not interested. Every brand said no, not interested. People aren't going to buy makeup looking at bigger women on TV.
Yeah.
Right? And she went on, what's it called? QVC. She tried for 2 years. She got a 10-minute slot, and she sold out of cosmetics in literally 8 minutes.
Amazing.
And then she sold her brand to L'Oreal, first woman to ever do this in the world, for $1.4 billion.
Wow.
What a story.
Absolutely.
And she talks it's all about self-worth.
Yeah. And I do think that's a big thing. I think we'll move on, but I think entrepreneurs have some internal drive or self-worth or right to prove themselves.
Yeah.
All high performers, to put yourself through that much pain, you must be running away from something in many cases rather than running to it. Nice.
Okay.
So next one from me is the journey, and not necessarily your story, because I think a lot of people listening to this will know who you are, or your information is very readily available. More as you've gone through that journey and experienced the highs and the lows of it, what have been, for people who are thinking about going on a journey, maybe they won't be as high or as low as yours has been at times. What is that experience like? The highest of highs, the lowest of lows. What's it like?
Lonely. I have to say that's the first thing that comes to mind. And it depends how you kind of frame that, because lonely can be really good in terms of you're singular in what you want to do. And a lot of the time people aren't going to understand it. And they're not going to rescue you. So in that way it's a good thing. But in another way, it can be really lonely because some people don't believe that they can do the things that you're doing, let alone you kind of do believe it, but you're going, shit, this is scary as fuck, you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
So the journey is, again, it's to do with experience and wisdom. The journey is the most important part of your life. And I've learned recently in the last 5 years that your journey and your story is your greatest asset, which I never really valued before. And I look back at my life and the kind of life that I chose, but also the life that I was a victim of somebody else as influence to follow them rather than my own way and having the courage to do it. And I think there was like you said, there was a fork where I said, right, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not aligned. It's not making me feel good. And that was a case where I had to completely take huge risk and do something that didn't pay me a salary and go all in. And I was the worst at it in the entire history of the company, but eventually it paid off because I started to understand that the only person that's going to save me is me. Responsibility was everything. The other thing I learned was that learning is my greatest asset. And I learned that whenever I leaned in and learned something deep dive without that rhetoric saying you're not good enough to go to university, when I detached that and said, right, I am good enough, I can learn this, anyone can, I found that my income and my life just rocketed.
And when you're in sometimes, so that mindset, absolutely, that growth mindset is like an essential for people who want to progress and progress fast, because you can't teach experience. You want to learn it, then you want to do it. Where you're starting from a slower start. So, for example, when you were in one of the lows of your life. So, let's take, for example, when you were homeless.
Yeah.
How much? What does it take? Does that make it actually easier to get on the high ramp and go for it, or does it, because you've got so much to run away from and you're so driven, or does it make it harder because actually you don't have access to resources, or mentally and emotionally you're not in a good place, and I think you end up in a hole?
Yeah, it's twofold. See, the one aspect is you're running, you've got this drive to do something, but the other aspect is you feel worthless.
Was that what it felt like?
Yeah, because society even Rishi Sunak said he wants to fine people sleeping rough.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, I didn't. Is that just headlines, or is that actually
No,
a policy?
that's actually he wants
These
to.
occupational homeless people that are going to get fined £12,000.
Yeah, I mean, how are they going to pay it?
Yeah, exactly.
First of all,
yeah. You're going to repossess your tent.
what are they going to do? CCJ and take your tent? Or whatever?
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
But then equally, you look at San Francisco or places like that, where it's like you've got to control it because that's out of control now, isn't it? It's ruining cities and states.
It's been out of control for many, many years. They just don't have a government policy for homelessness.
Is that right?
Anywhere in the world. So going back to the question, the first instinct is survival. And but I had a drive, but it was survival that was pushing me, right? But I had this cheeky personality a little bit that I didn't really give a shit if anything bad happened, because it was so bad before that it was all action. It wasn't thinking time because it was survival instinct.
Yeah.
And some of the shops said, yeah, you can clean the floor. So I got really good at cleaning floors. And it was like, they paid me like £1.50 an hour. And I got really good, and then eventually got to know the manager, and I was humble and shy, and they kind of liked me, and they kind of trusted me, and they started giving me the keys to lock the shops. So I would live in the roof or live in the cellar. I was the hidden homeless.
Yeah.
And actually, most homeless people are hidden homeless, not on the street.
And did they know you were staying there?
No, they didn't know, because I developed this skill set of being hidden and invisible.
Wow. I mean, did that start to build your confidence up? Because then you create your own little story, you live in this own little journey, you're probably putting a couple of faces on.
Yeah, but I built my own world. I became confident in that space.
And did you enjoy it? Did you, not necessarily the homelessness, but maybe you did, but the process of
I enjoyed the entrepreneurship of the whole thing. I enjoyed, I've just got one up on the shop. They don't know I'm doing this. I've just got this. I've just done that. So I was giving myself dopamine shots in the actions that I was taking. That was making me feel good about myself. So it was actually building up my self-worth and, secondly, my confidence.
Strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
'Cause I've done some really rubbish jobs. I've been on the tools. I did floor screeding, which we used to say they should give people for community service.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I loved getting covered in dirt. I loved sweating.
Right.
I loved doing it. I just loved it. And I don't know why that is. I don't know.
I think it's the physical exercise and the pride of your work that you've done a good job. That's the dopamine hit.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah.
And just progressing. I think growth is a key one. Is I just always enjoy growing. If I'm doing the same thing, even if it's making me hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, it doesn't satisfy me. I need to do something that pushes me, something that's new.
I mean, and that's the 6 human needs. I don't know if you've studied that with Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, yeah.
Significance, certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, growth and contribution. So the growth and contribution are the two that are more spiritual. So when I was cleaning the floors, it wasn't just it was clean. It was like I thought I was doing a service to the people walking.
So it's interesting. What about, just to finish off, what would you say the highest of high when you've sold documentaries to Netflix and been number 2 in the charts? Like, what would you say the highest of high has been?
Well, people say when your kid's born.
Okay.
So
I look forward to that. Excellent.
But but it's a different experience.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think there's been so many, but if I had to single it out, it would probably be the day that my feature film debuted at number 2 on Netflix USA.
Nice.
It was 3 a.m.
That was Legacy of Lies.
That was Legacy of Lies. It was 3 a.m, and I woke up, and my phone went, and it was my friend who I went to acting school with.
You didn't even know, did you? Didn't he tell you?
Didn't even know. He told me. He said, "Do you realise your film's at #2 on Netflix?" I says, "What?" Didn't believe it, half awake. I'm thinking, I'm discombobulated and walking around the bedroom naked. I'm thinking, and suddenly I'm Googling it, and it's true. And I'm like, oh my God. I just put music on and danced all around my apartment completely naked. It was fantastic. It's the
Amazing.
best feeling I've ever had.
Yeah, good for you, and congratulations. I've never met anyone with half the film, media, production accolades that you've achieved. So it deserves a naked dance.
Yeah, it did.
Maybe your naked
Not
dance
with
rather
you
than
there,
mine.
just mine.
Maybe
Yes.
we'll do that afterwards. Congratulations. Right, you're up. Next topic.
Okay. What made you the most scared ever?
Very good question. So, as we do, I'd probably think most recently, I would say the biggest thing I've been scared of in my recent adult life was probably my dad died last year.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. And it was it wasn't necessarily his funeral, it was preparing for his funeral. And I haven't been scared for a decade because I put myself deliberately and intentionally in difficult situations. And as you get older, you become more comfortable, don't you? I don't think they get any more risky or any more less scary, but you live in that space and, you get thicker skin. And I would say the fear that I had of going through that experience and not thinking emotionally or mentally that I'd have it in me. And anyone who's been through that experience might be able to resonate. Those who don't wouldn't. But it was a fear for, and it was probably after the sort of numbness wore off of him dying and then maybe getting a week out from the funeral and preparing the speech and thinking about carrying the coffin and standing there and doing a eulogy. I was without a doubt the most scared I've ever been in my life. Like really scared, emotionally scared, terrified. I don't know if we were on the mic when we were talking about earlier about if I had the opportunity to leave and not do it, would I do it at any point? So that was.
What do you think the fear was? Do you think it was doing him proud at his funeral? Do you think that was what the lens was?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things you never want to do, I think. So there's certain things in your life you don't want to do, whether you know they're going to happen or not. And I think it was the fear of, yes, it's a really, really good question. I think it was, did I have the strength to do it?
Right.
I managed his illness and his death emotionally quite well. And I thought, am I sort of approaching a cliff edge of a breakdown that's going to happen in the middle of carrying his coffin or something like that? And yeah, it was just emotionally, I'll say that was the scariest thing.
So it was a vulnerability, I think.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, it was fear. Like when you say scared, I was scared. I was fearful. So that was the most recent thing. And then I'll have to think while you talk. What would you say? What have you done that's been really scary?
There's a few things. There's one thing that stands out.
Go on.
And the reason I'm making a musical is about this. So when I was making the feature film that eventually succeeded on Netflix, it was going to be a different film called Truth 99, which is the true story of how the Russians bombed a building in Kiev in 1999. Because the director's wife was Ukrainian, it was meaningful. So we wrote the script, we did all the social media, got the word out, and as the word was reaching further, Adrian calls me one day, and that point I was in Malaysia. Had my own restaurant there, spent 20 years there. And he said, are you sitting down? I said, why? He said, are you sitting down? I said, no. He said, sit the fuck down now. I said, okay. He said, your face, your social media is all over Russian news.
I did see that.
And I said, is this a joke? He said, no, it's not a joke. My first reaction was, great, that's fantastic PR. Right? That was my overriding instinct to say. He said, no, they've circled your comments in red about the you-know-who.
Yeah.
I said, well, I don't believe it. Send me the newsreel.
That makes me feel nervous just listening to it, and it wasn't my face or name.
So I got the newsreel sent to me and translated, and it was true. And I was watching my picture, all my social media on Russian TV, and the newsreader saying, this guy is a dead man walking. Is he crazy? Now, when I saw that, it kind of sunk in, and then I was really scared. But the thing was, making a film was my life's dream. And I'd lost the money. I think I told you that before in the conversation, that I'd put 25 grand in with this other filmmaker to make the film, and I lost the money. She disappeared. And then this came. I thought, I'm never going to make this film. So one side of me driving to make this film, the second side of me has got this threat, can't make the film. And as we're success-driven, we're thinking, how are we going to get out of this and make the film, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we decided to stop production until it all kind of blew over. Now, at the same time this was happening, for probably about 6 months, I would think, there was a beautiful Russian girl on my Instagram chatting away. Not sexually, just very nice, love what you do, all that kind of stuff. And eventually got more, intimate. And she said, can I come and stay with you and see you? I said, sure. So picked her up at the airport, took her back to my place. And after 3 days in bed, not that I'm a great in bed, but after 3 days in bed, red silk sheets, just like a James Bond film set, she said to me, we were both naked, she said, I don't think you should make that film. And I said, why would you say that? She said, because I'm not who you think I am.
Oh, my God.
Well, I said, who the fuck are you? She says, I've been sent here to warn you not to make that film. Now, at this moment, I'm having visions of From Russia with Love, this surreal kind of detachment.
Sounds like you just walked into a film.
Exactly. This is literally a movie. And I'm laughing because you laugh when you're nervous and you're afraid, right? You don't know what to do. Literally, I'm naked, totally vulnerable. And I said, well, what? She says, I'm Russian FSB and I've been sent to warn you. Your office has been booked for the last 9 months. We know exactly what you're doing. So what you do when you sat there lying there naked, and of course, everything stops working, and you kind of don't know what to do, because if you make a move, you could be dead. I mean, she could have a gun under the pillow. She could put poison in my drink. Anything literally could happen.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
And there's no one else there. Man, I lived in this penthouse apartment. No one else is around me. No neighbors. So I thought this could be it. Anyway, I laughed it off and, I said I don't believe it and all this kind of thing as a way to kind of avert it. And my instinct then, my only instinct, because I'm very good at survival, was to just take her in public for the next, because she was due to stay with me for another week. Take her in public, meet all the friends, make sure everyone knew who she was, so at least if anything happened, they'd know that was the suspect, right? So this went on for like 3-4 days before I could even process what she had said to me. I got the office checked and it was booked. So she was telling the truth. And one day she said, listen, I'm cousins with the president, and showed me a picture of them both embracing.
And is this the film that you did actually end up releasing?
No.
This is the next one. This is The Legacy of Spies.
So the musical is Legacy of Spies.
Yeah.
So anyway, it took me 3 days to process this. And I said, listen, and I sat her down. I said, I've made my decision. I said, listen, I've had a really good think about what you told me. And I'm going to say something to you right now that I need to say, because this could be the last week of my life, right? I said, number one, I'm not going to make that film. Number two, if you were going to kill me, you would have already killed me, because you guys are pretty clever at doing that. And I said, thirdly, because it's the last week of my life, I'm going to have a good time. Now, you can stay with me and have a good time with me, as it could be the last 7 days of my life, or you can disappear. She laughed, and she says, no one's ever said that to me before, and we had a great time.
And obviously you're still here. So
I'm still here. Now, cut to 18 months later, the actual filming of Legacy of Lies in Kiev, I get a phone call from reception in the hotel. I said, Mr. Robinson, there's someone here to see you. She said she knows you. She said, I don't know anyone in Kiev. Well, she said she knows you. I said, put her on the phone. She says, Marco, it's Anastasia. We met in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, remember? Can you come down and see me? So I'm thinking, oh, my God. So I went, this is the same girl that was in bed there threatening to kill me. Went downstairs. Let's have lunch. She said, right, I'm going to come on the film set, meet all the actors and the crew, and tell them to stop filming because I think you're still filming the film. Now, I was already cool because it was not telling the true story. So that was good, right? And I basically stood up and said, no, you're not. You can go fuck yourself. You're not going to do that. And if you do that, things are going to happen that I'm going to do because I've got a gun.
Okay.
Right? And then she laughed and all that kind of thing, and then I never saw her again.
Blimey. That is... I'm not surprised you were scared. That sounds like something out of a feature film, let alone making one. Goodness me. You have ridden quite the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Let's line it up a bit with something. Oh, no, in fact, on par with that, profile. You have a big profile in the UK, around the world, social media, UK TV, documentaries, Netflix. When we think about the profile and having a big profile, how did you build it? Why have you got it? And what does it do for you?
Great questions.
Apart from what you've just shared.
Apart from what I've just shared. Well, I've been in business a long time, so especially now in 2024, social media is everything. People don't go and tons of research in Google anymore. They go straight to your Instagram, see who you are, presently, correct, authentic. Is this
That's
guy?
the first thing we did.
Yeah, there you go.
First thing I did. And then you go down the rabbit hole, and I feel like we've known each other for years.
Exactly, right? So that's what we do. So therefore, it didn't used to be like that, as you know. Didn't used to be like that. And very early on, social media is pretty young, really, and it's like 20 years old, less than 20 years old, isn't it? Before Instagram, I think Facebook was 2007.
Well, I remember joining Facebook in 2004 when I started university.
Yeah, something like that.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. And at that time, I was doing like newspaper ads and being really successful at that with property events like you used to do and like you do. And, I met some younger guy, said, listen, newspapers are finished. It's all about Facebook. I said, not believing 100%. I said, okay, let's try some stuff. And I kind of built my profile for kind of fun, not really for business. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I just started posting crap that I was doing, right? And then I realized people actually are engaging with it. And I thought, what the fuck? This is interesting. And then I just kept doing it and with no strategy. No strategy at all. Not thinking that anyone would buy any products off an IG account. Why would people do that? Right? So I just kept doing it. And then I just kept building the audience. And then it got fun because, of course, the vanity metrics were kicking in. I was building an audience. I was getting engagement. And as you probably know now, I like to do really big stuff. For me, life's very short. So if I'm going to do something just like you, I want to go and do it properly, big, all that kind of thing, right? Done 2 million on my Instagram in the last few years.
Amazing.
It's nuts.
And is that products that you've got and you're sort of selling them through your DMs or using like Instagram shop or like offers?
Not even using a shop, just a plain old IG account where I'm either promoting a masterclass.
Okay.
I've got offers within
paid
IG.
Masterclass or a free
masterclass.
Yeah.
Some low cost to do paid.
Yeah.
But I've created an offer suite. Now, I started with a high ticket, like 10 grand, 6-month coaching with me.
Yeah.
And I started off after the pandemic, after the attempted suicide attempt, very nervous, very unconfident, but it was like, why not? Let's do this. And I think I put a post saying I'm looking for 5 people to teach in business to be successful online, and I got like 150 messages. And then I booked all these phone calls in. It took me. They were booked out for 6 weeks, and when I got to 2 weeks, people had forgot about the phone calls. So I had a lot of learning there, you know. But then people started buying, and I think at 12 grand my first month with no ads or nothing. Like I've never done ads until 3 months ago. Really, so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And are you finding that through organic or paid? Through
It was all organic.
Really?
Yeah. And what I did to reach more targeted clients, I hired my son to do cold outreach on DM.
And was that effective to?
Oh, fantastic!
Really?
Absolutely
To
fantastic.
existing followers or to people who've engaged or just to
Complete
anyone?
strangers,
Really?
coaches.
I actually sit on a
yeah.
board of a company who do that, and I've always been hesitant to it. They absolutely rave about it.
Yeah.
And you would likewise.
Like, well, we did
just cold outreach.
1 million on DMs, cold outreach.
That's impressive. And it's literally just sort of, we would call it flirt and convert. Sort of
Yeah.
reach out, establish conversation, see what they want.
Yeah. But now it's less BS. Because before there was like, you know,
I mean, I get cold outreach all day, every day.
Yeah.
People who want to edit my reels, people who want to come
Tons
on
of
the
it.
podcast. And I can see it. It just doesn't even look to me like a natural conversation.
because it's crap.
So,
right?
but it's a different way of doing it. It's not
because it's got to be completely authentic. And because I've built a decent profile, they kind of, okay, let's have a look at the message.
Yeah.
That's the bit of a difference.
When did you go through the gears with that? So you had your sort of newspapers, social media, then you started to move into like Channel 4. You know, you've done a number of episodes and series with them about giving houses away for free. How did you get that break, or how did you?
That's a very interesting story.
Was it worthwhile?
This is the first time I've told the truth about that
Okay,
entirely.
let's go.
You've got an exclusive on this.
Let's go.
Now, I wrote a book in 2017 called The Financial Freedom Guarantee.
Yes.
About property. And I was promoting it everywhere. And I did a competition to give away a house. If you bought the book, you got like a free ticket. And I gave a house away for that, right?
House, no mortgage.
Correct.
Into your name.
Correct. So
bold thing to do.
Very bold thing.
I like it.
It was a very bold thing. But it worked because Channel 4 sent a message to me. So, Mr. Robinson, we love your story. We love the fact you're giving a property away with your book. We've researched you that you were homeless. We're making a TV show about the social housing issue in the UK. We would love you to do the show, to be your show, and we would love you to give your house away to a homeless family on the TV show. Now, I didn't even hesitate. I mean, it's literally a microsecond said, yes, I'll do it now.
Yeah.
Because I could see the PR value, not just for helping homelessness, but the PR value for the brand was probably in the most enormous thing, opportunity. Now, behind the scenes, they told me that, Marco, we actually did approach other people before you. I haven't told people that before.
Cool.
We approached billionaires, multimillionaires, and they said, listen, they'd give like a year's rent, but they wouldn't give the house away. I said, okay. So, you're our last kind of hope, right? So it wasn't because of me, but it was because I took the risk to do that before. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I had, I don't know, I can't remember what channel it was, but when they did the Meet the Landlord series, sort of undercover landlord, tenant, and then you had to go and meet the tenant. You might even had to swap houses with the tenant.
Yeah.
And I was very hesitant about doing it. I agreed to do it. They came out and did the first day of filming, and I just had this vibe that they were going to put me in a really bad light. And one of my friends did it, and he actually did get shown in a bad light. And I was quite glad that I backed out of it in the end. But you came across incredibly well. They were very complimentary.
Yeah.
They obviously promoted you giving a house away for free to homeless people. So it'd be even the best headline clickbaiter would struggle to throw that down the drain.
I didn't see a downside, but in it, obviously I wanted to do it for philanthropy because that was something that was a big statement. I mean, the original show was to highlight the fact that there's so much homelessness, and the reason people are homeless is they can't afford to pay the rent.
Yeah.
The cost of living crisis is nuts. It's bonkers. And for me, it was making a statement that, listen, we need to address this issue. we need to get on this. And after that show, I started my own charity, and we've helped hundreds of families off the street that were sleeping rough.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well done. Congratulations. And that was actually the first time I saw you about 5 years ago in the
that's right.
Times when you did that. So funny how things come around. You're up.
Okay.
Penultimate round.
Greatest achievement as you see it.
Greatest achievement as I see it. I don't want to be unsensitive saying this because you shared with me before the podcast and you shared when we were recording a moment ago that you had an attempted suicide attempt. And I haven't had that. I've had some dark times, but I can categorically say I have never, and touch wood, won't ever, but I can't say that, but I haven't ever had that experience. Although I have lost lots of friends through suicide ever since I was a kid. What I would say is one of my greatest achievements is I never thought I would live to an older age, or I was always paranoid I would die young, and I'm starting to shake it off now. But I would say my greatest achievement by my standards is to live to this age and be fit and healthy, because I never saw
But you're so young.
Yeah, I know, which is bonkers. This is bonkers. Yeah, actually, the reason for that was, and I shared this in my dad's eulogy, one of the reasons I handled my dad's death really well was my dad had the same issue. He, for whatever reason, was convinced he was going to die young. So he always used to say, when he was talking about retirement or talking about making the most of life, he'd say, if I'm lucky, I've got 7 years healthy left. And he always used to say, I won't be here in 10 years. Well, he's been saying that for 15 years. So it's kind
of a self-fulfilling prophecy in the end.
Yeah, he'd been saying it for 15 years. So actually, when he did die, I thought I was on borrowed time anyway. But what it did do was it made him live a great life. He was only retired for a year before he died, but he didn't need his retirement because actually he lived his whole life to the max. Always did what he wanted, had a great time, happy days. And he said many times if he died today, he would have died a happy man. So that was great. But I think it also instilled in me, twofold. One is when he died, and I talked about it in his eulogy at his funeral, was it didn't surprise me. And actually for 10 years, every moment I'd spent with him, I'd taken these mental photos because in my head, I thought this could be the last time I eat this dinner with you.
So you kind of collected the memories, put a stamp on it.
When people say, I wish I'd have been more present when I was with them. Yeah. There's not a person on this earth who has probably been more present with another individual. In fact, that's probably an exaggeration. But every time I was with him, in my head, I was constantly thinking this could be the last time, which was really, really valuable as an experience and had a lot of value. But also I think it put that into my head. I was not going to live to a decent age. That's one thing. And then second, and I shared this on a podcast last week, was I genuinely walk around in my life sometimes now, and I don't want this to sound arrogant, but I can't believe how amazing my life is, and I can't believe I got here. Yeah. There's so many times I could have gone bust, had deals go belly up. Deals that I've bought that have been absolute lemons and could have lost me £1 million have actually made me £1 million. Things that I've done, and I just think I just am astonished that it's worked out well for me. But then equally, I look back and think, I think I do deserve it. I think I worked hard for it. Yeah. I don't think there's always luck, but I also think I gave it everything I had. Yeah. And I would say to be where I am today astonishes me, and it's my greatest achievement.
That's an awesome story.
I think that's my first. Yeah. Yeah, and then hopefully having a baby, that would be.
So I think that is like that you've gone all out. There's nothing more you could have done. So that's your greatest achievement, right? Because it was all you. You went to beyond the limit sometimes.
Yeah, I just think it was. Yeah. When you ask me, it's because it's fresh in my head, and I've got a lot of gratitude at the minute. The last year or so, lots of gratitude for various reasons, and I feel like that's probably my greatest achievements. And then there would be other ones along the way where I've stood there and thought, "Wow, I can't believe." But I suppose it all crescendos up, doesn't it? What about you? Greatest achievement?
It's a difficult question, really.
How do you feel in reflection about your attempted suicide? Do you feel that that's an achievement, having survived that? Has it given you a new lease of...
It did, because the day that happened, I was actually in my mum's house upstairs.
Okay.
And we just got the letter from the bank, and I collapsed on the floor.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to show her, you see, because I retired her.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough backstep then, isn't it?
Yeah. And I went and bought loads of pills, and then I swallowed about 250 pills or something like that. 15 minutes later, my mum comes in with the letter.
That was before the letter arrived.
No, after she found the letter,
Okay.
read the letter, she came upstairs through the door,
Yeah.
and she says, "We can beat these bastards."
Oh, wow.
Now that I didn't expect. I did not expect that. And she went, and I put my fingers down my throat and threw up all the pills. And that moment, I said, right. I basically, like you just said, I went all out and fought the bank. The bank was the biggest enemy. And I had to go on social media and call them out because they sold that. They did a survey but didn't pick up the fire cladding. And they tried to sell it without the fire cladding approval. They sold it without telling the next buyer that the fire cladding was bad. And I got it on tape. I got the new buyer on tape. Because they tried to take me to High Court and sue me. So I got all this evidence together.
You said that was to the tune of like 2 million, 3 million?
3.6 million.
3.6 million?
Yeah. And they went, well, they did a lot of dirty tricks, Daniel. They slimed me on social media. They got personal. They said I was a liar and all this kind of stuff, right? So I had to go and get the evidence. And when I did, they pulled out and basically pulled out the claim on my assets, and I won.
Yeah, amazing.
Right? But yes, so you're probably right. That was the greatest achievement.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah. And it gives, hopefully, I mean, congratulations on going through that experience and coming out the other end. Like, you know, more power to you. And equally, for people that are listening to this, we need to have that conviction and confidence you can go up against the big boys. In 2010, I think it was, I had about 2 or 3 million with Lloyd's, and I'd locked it sort of post global financial crisis. I'd locked it on a 25-year repayment at 6.4%,
right,
which was high by anyone's standard. But because I didn't want to get caught out by inflation, or I just thought it was a safe bet. But then when George Osborne brought in the Section 21, 4 was it?
Yeah,
where he banned landlords being able to offset interest.
Yeah.
I went from the net difference was losing tens of thousands of pounds a month. I couldn't physically afford to hold the portfolio. I went to Lloyd's, and nowhere near the same scale as yours. But in order to get off that loan, they wanted 128 million or 128 grand on one loan and 114 on the other. So it's best part of £250,000
a lot of money
in early redemption fees to get off the loan. And I was like, that's absolutely bonkers. So we went to war with them, and in the end, we paid 18 grand.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's like less than.
That is incredible, man.
Yeah, yeah, and it just shows that although they're the banks and you think they're the big boys, if it's not fair and it's not right, I know I was on the hook for that early redemption, but because the law had changed, it was like, look, you can either work with me on this, or it's going to be a bigger problem. So.
Well, that is, you're right. I mean, they were such a bully, and everyone's scared of banks. Well,
I think also they rightly should be. I mean, my biggest just before you came in, we were doing some content, and they were saying, is it easy? Well, this would be a good question for you. The question they asked me was, is it easier to get wealthy, or is it harder to get wealthy or stay wealthy? What would your answer be?
It's not an easy answer, is it?
No, that's that was my answer. That was my exact was my exact answer. I was like, that's a really tough question.
Yeah.
Is it harder to get wealthy or stay wealthy?
You'd have to say get wealthy. That would be the go-to, wouldn't it? However, when you get wealthy, everyone wants to take it off you.
Yeah, including the banks. Yeah. That's where I went with it. As I think I would say probably get wealthy was the harder part. But it depends what you like, because if you get wealthy and you walk around carrying loads of liabilities and overheads, then it's going to be hard because you're going to be constantly navigating different economic environments, governments. Whereas if you get to the top and then you de-risk and you de-leverage and you diversify, it becomes easier. And my business partner lost a lot of money when Lehman Brothers went down.
Yeah.
And after that, he refused to use banks. So we did everything cash.
Wow.
We never borrowed any money.
Wow.
And he in his head, he did not like the banks. And I've got other clients and investors who've been bankrupt. And they're like, just don't use the banks. Because when the tune gets called in, it's all well and good. They'll lend you money. What's that saying about the umbrella? The banks will lend you an umbrella until it's raining.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And they'll lend you money as long as you don't need it. But when that market tanks and they want to and they say you're no longer 75% loan to value because the market's dropped 15, 20%, which some people could have been caught out with in the last 2 years, then they pull the rug and say, right, as per clause 156 in your mortgage, you need to recollateralise your portfolio.
And there is no movement on that whatsoever.
No, you've got 30 days, you pay down 25% of your debt, or we repossess the property.
Yeah.
And then they ride the market for 6 months, and then they... Bonkers. Yeah. Right, last but not least, let's end with something nice, but also I'll be intrigued to know your angle. So, philanthropy.
Yeah.
You have done lots of charitable efforts. You got your knighthood for charitable efforts. Yeah. You helped over 300,000 people, I believe, in Malaysia, blind people. Yeah. You've now also started your own charity in this country.
Yeah.
You've given unencumbered properties away for free to the homeless. What is your take on philanthropy? What is your experience with it? Why do it? Let's go for that to finish.
Why do it? Because of my own story of homelessness. And also, not just that, but also the causes of it, which are not necessarily, they are the fact that you can't afford the rent, but the causes of that. You know, and watching my mum suffering hugely, you know, and being sexually abused by a stepdad for years. You know, when she was 12, he put his hand on her breast and said, I didn't marry you for your mum, I married your mum to get to you.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
That's in the patriarch in the 70s, right? So a lot of it is my own story, definitely. The fact that the first thing I wanted to do was retire my mum so she didn't have any worries financially anymore, right? Then it was about looking at the infrastructure that there is no system that protects anyone if they are about to lose their house. And you know, if you get blacklisted for not paying one payment on time, 6 years, you're not going to get a loan, which is acutely ridiculous. It's punitive. And I was meeting a lot of homeless people, especially recently, and finding out their stories and, you know, broken relationships, emotional problems. But there was no mention of addiction, because addiction became a result of the pain to numb the pain of where they were.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I saw all of that, and I met a lot of people, and I met a guy called Andrew Funk about 5 years ago. He watched the TV show, said, let's collaborate. And he was homeless as well, and actually he was the only person that went to the European Parliament and actually got a policy together and actually started moving things. And now we actually partnered, we got a place in Barcelona, and we did a test run of getting corporates to sponsor a family or a single person if they were educated for 1 year, every month, and we had a 100% success rate. We found the model to get people out and back into work or into a small business, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the story.
And what is it and also it is a natural, I suppose entrepreneurship is a rite of passage to philanthropy, because you need the time, the experience, the money to do it. But it's also the natural journey. Most big players, you know, whether it's Warren Buffett or, you know, most people tend to, not most people, a lot of people tend to go towards that. Why do you think that is? Why do you think philanthropy is the, you know?
I think philanthropy for a lot of rich people is a veil.
Okay, let's explore that. So that's interesting.
Well, let's talk about Epstein, for example. Let's talk about Bill Gates, for example.
Well, Bill Gates, I mean, Epstein immediately just screams, you know, that's blatantly an issue. Bill Gates, I've never seen anything incriminating of him, but heard everything, him be branded with everything. Yeah. Is that legit? Is he like really?
Well, I mean, I didn't really believe it totally until I heard his wife speak about him. His ex-wife.
Not heard that.
Yeah. That he went to Epstein Island, and as soon as she knew that was really it for her, right? But there was a lot of other stuff. I mean, he's buying all this farmland.
I saw that, yeah.
You know, cows are bad for the environment. You know, let's get the processed vegetarian food. We don't need farmers. And where is that going? You know,
Yeah.
climate change, really. You know, so that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, so on the same vein though, what you were saying earlier about, and so we've got a charity. Well, it's a. I didn't actually go to register a charity. We have a charity initiative every year where we partner with another charity.
Right.
And last year we hit £500,000 donated for various charities around the world. And our key mantra is similar to yours, where we don't want to pay the overheads of big charities. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast at the weekend, and they went through these big name charities and said what percentage of donations actually
gets to
the fund, like is actually given to a person.
It's like small percentage,
single digits.
Yeah,
single digits, and the rest was on consultants, professional fees, overheads.
It's the most legal money laundering venture ever.
I mean, that's sad, isn't it? It's disappointing. I mean, we raise money, but I also give money. You know, the girl was around the pub on Sunday when I was watching the football, shaking the Macmillan bucket, and I was like, 20 quid, there you go.
Yeah.
Is that going to make its way? You'd hope so, but
it doesn't.
Maybe
it
not.
Just doesn't. That's the unfortunate. I mean, and let's talk about the UK's policy that they have to help foreign countries that are in trouble, supposedly in trouble. That's written into the law, right? You know, I was reading a story where they gave 17 million to the South African president, and he built a house with it for 17 million. You know, there's so much of that going on.
And America, I mean, again, I was listening to stuff at the weekend approaching the election where all this funding's go, like anyway, conspiracies.
We can go on all day about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to end on a positive note. But
I will say one thing: if the Chinese government makes the voting machines in America, there's a red flag.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. It'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, you can go down that route.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to explore is because I've been asked this before, and it'd just be good to get your opinion. So I do my charitable stuff and like raise money for charities. It's something that's quite close to my heart, and I do really enjoy it. But people say, why do you do it? And I was like, what? Apart from you want to help other people in that scenario. In fact, no, maybe that is your answer.
You want to help people that want to be helped.
Yeah, and I think actually, when people say to me, "Why do I do it?" I don't think it's 100% charity. As in, I don't. It doesn't. It's not like it's not self-serving. It makes me feel good.
Yeah.
I like to help other people.
Yeah.
And a friend private messaged me the other day, and because he'd seen me sponsoring someone, he said, "What is your sponsorship policy?" Because whenever anyone posts a link, I'm the first one that's in there with my 50 quid or 100 quid.
Yeah.
And if it's someone that's really close to me, it's 100 quid. If it's anybody that I've never met, it's 50 quid.
Yeah.
And they were like, what's your mantra or mindset? And I was like, I actually feel an obligation. I have to donate. I feel like I have to. I don't feel sane or like comfortable unless I'm donating.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I just feel like I have to do it. I feel like an obligation. And I don't know whether, I suppose it would just be interesting to know whether that you've ever felt like that.
I feel exactly the same as you. I feel that it's an obligation, definitely. And I feel that it's a contribution thing. If I'm not contributing, and in a way I feel guilty that I can actually help someone and have an impact if it's authentic. But even with there's so much charity going on that, like you say, you don't know where the money's going, if it's going to get there. But if you can help a little bit, you want to do something.
Yeah. And our biggest sentiment is we don't pay office overheads. We're buying for homeless people. Like if it was for homeless people, it would be like socks and sleeping bags. It wouldn't be £100,000 donation to like a head office bill and stuff like that. So it's finding these niche it's interesting.
During just before the pandemic, I met the government. I had an idea to actually secure the fact that if you sent money, it got to the person you wanted to help, and actually all people got the money through blockchain technology. And I had all the system laid out.
You're literally into everything.
Yeah, well, it was just that if entrepreneur think, well, how can I make things better all the time, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure I saw you on a crypto podcast once.
You probably did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, good for you. And probably closing sentiment. So that's good on philanthropy. And a question I asked you right at the beginning is, all things considered, you've been kind enough to give us your time and share your journey. You seem to be speeding up, whereas I seem to be like trying to slow down. Yeah. Do you still genuinely love it? Like what's driving you? Where are you going? Like what's the closing sentiment? What's the future look like?
It's a really good question. In fact, it's a brilliant question because that is subjective for me, and I'm sure it isn't for other people, but I would say that I don't actually know what gives me this drive. I couldn't identify one thing that gives it to me. I think it's a kind of thirst to keep proving myself.
What does it feel like? Does it feel satisfying?
Yes, it's a thing that anything's possible. I get all the time to me, Marco, you're in the film industry, you're doing property, doing that. How can you do all these things? And why are you doing that?
What did you think apart from the fact you were coming here, on an average day when you wake up? Like I listened to Dana White and Lex Friedman's interview the other day, which was amazing. Dana White says every day he gets up and he's strapping his boots on, ready for war, because he's just a savage. What's your general vibe when you're getting up? Like in this stage in your journey, this stage in your career, what's that general vibe or feeling that you've got? Just to finish,
I think it's just seize the day, man. And what can I do today? It's extraordinary. That's what it is. And when that film went to number 2, Netflix, oh my God. My first question was, what can I do next?
Yeah.
How can I top that? That was the question. Not, oh, that's great now, I'll just slow down. And the answer came, write a musical about a life story. And it was overpowering, Daniel. It was undeniable. And I thought to myself, how the fuck am I going to write a musical? I can't even sing. And then I went for a friend of a friend, and it's a true story. I went to, I was in Clubhouse, the days of Clubhouse, right?
Yeah. Short days.
Short days. So I met a lady called Susie Shaw, who was the lead singer of Hearsay. I don't know if you know Susie.
No.
And we met and said, listen, I want to sing. I want to learn to sing. I need lessons. Can you recommend anyone? I said, yeah. So she got me this singing lesson. And that was 2.5 years ago. And now I can sing.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 6th round with Daniel Hill and Sir Marco Robinson. Do you want to hit the bell to finish? Absolutely smashed it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Daniel. Been great. Fantastic.